That time, the company lawyers told me to contact law enforcement, posted my moral logjam. This took place years ago, but it still makes me laugh at the sheer stupidity of it all. It starts as all truly great sagas published on the internet begin, when I met a random guy through a friend at a bar in the city. Let's call the guy I met Mark for the purpose of this post. My friend had introduced me to Mark because for a few years leading up to that introduction, I shared an idea that I had for a business with anyone who would listen. I was told that Mark wanted to start his own business, had worked in the industry, knew a lot about the subject matter required, and thought that my idea was good. Mark and I met up for a lunch. We hit it off, and he said that he'd start the business as the CEO and agreed to me taking a part-time operational role. I agreed to help solely in a part-time operational role because I couldn't afford to quit my day job. I put in 15% of the cash for 5% ownership since Mark was going to put in founder hours, which is 80 plus hours a week, and agreed to put up 85% of the cash, which was more money than I could afford to risk on a new venture. So I worked part-time. I did what I said I would do, and I even tried to be of assistance on things that I had no experience with. I connected Mark with a fella that I'd done business with before, and we'll call him Paul. Paul and I got into a dispute ourselves. More on this later. Anyway, let's fast forward a few months, and I got into a dispute with Mark over stationery. Yes, stationery not being to his liking caused him to flip out. This was despite him picking the stationery out. Next up, the contract I got from Mark was not what we agreed. The legal work required a few months to get done, and I had expected delays, but when I finally got it, the paperwork didn't represent what I had agreed to own. Not only that, but my investment wasn't being acknowledged under the terms that we had committed to when I put the money in. Now, as I said, I wasn't able to risk much, and I only invested what I could afford to lose, so this wasn't a huge sum of money. I didn't want to make a big deal about it since the amount was small, and he began promising a new contract when the business could pay for the lawyers to make changes. I signed nothing. Then it worsened. Mark and I start to fight anytime we're in a room together. As I think back, it's almost comical how angry he would get in my presence. I have other things to do with my time than squabble over stuff like stationery, so I worked on my areas of the business and I hoped that things would grow. I stopped in whenever I could and would help out regularly as needed with as little Mark interaction as possible. Paul would intervene sometimes when Mark would get particularly difficult to be around. Anyway, fast forward about 2 years, and Mark can't help but tell everyone who will listen that the business is going well. I have no idea how well things are going because Mark isn't giving me any updates. So I get a call around Christmas from Mark, and he wishes me a happy holiday and then drops the bomb on me that he wants to terminate my involvement and refund my investment. I decline the investment refund and say that I'm happy to no longer work with him. In my head, I think it's kind of hilarious that he thinks that this will just end that easily, but I say nothing to that accord to him. Mark and I hang up with him aggravated about my refusal to take the refund on my investment. Mark then sends me an email that I had resigned. This had no basis in fact, but certainly was creative about what we had just discussed. I correct him immediately in a reply, stating that he wanted to no longer work together, and that I can see that being the case, but want to discuss my investment. A few days later, Mark demands that I come and pick up a check for a reimbursement of my investment. I do not come and get it. Next thing you know, the company attorney huffs and puffs and tries to scare me with some strongly worded letter. This is the same idiot attorney who screwed up my contract to work on the business and my investment agreement. Let's call this attorney Mr. Cohn for the sake of the story. I send an email response to Mr. Cohn that he screwed up and the company seems to be doing well, that I hear rumors about how well, that I want to be on this for the foreseeable future, and I will not take a one-to-one cash out for what I put in. The attorney then emails me back, stating in writing that Mark never accepted my electronic transfer into the company account. Instead, Mark has another company he accepted the money into, a company I've never heard of. a company that is different than the name of the recipient on my electronic transfer, a company that will be committing wire fraud to accept the money that I sent. On that note, I did some sleuthing online. I found out that Mark had been forming one company every month or two. Then there were media reports and documents that he let slip in shared drives that he forgot that I had access to from when we agreed to work together. Mark was too cheap and stupid to pay for tech help, so he was using my shared folders that I'd created, and I certainly wasn't obligated to turn off the shares if he wanted to work out of them. Those documents showed me Mark had recently raised money in the company that I sent the payment to at 200 times the valuation that I had bought into it at, and Mark didn't disclose my investment to the new investors. Mark had, however, put me on documents showing my ownership to the previous investors. Not on documents I had ever seen before, but documents that he'd been sending around. When I share my suspicions that Mark is committing wire fraud with Mr. Cohn, I am told that I am the one breaking the law by knowing anything about the investment documents the company had used. Mr. Cohn tells me that by not picking up my check, I will not be entitled to any money and to contact law enforcement if I think something illegal has happened. He cautions, though, that I'll be the one in trouble. Cue the malicious compliance. I let the different respective members of the Securities and Exchange Commission, along with law enforcement, know what had happened to me. I provided them with all of the documents that I had from the matter. It took about 5 years for the investigation to conclude, for charges to be brought, for a trial to conclude, and for Mark to go to jail. They say government is slow, but they aren't kidding with just how slow. Maybe it was slow because Mark was running a large, tens of millions of dollars large fraud? Anyway, Mark will be serving time for about 30 felony charges they found uncovering the details of his Ponzi scheme. He will be away for a long time. I never did anything wrong. With the information that I was able to provide, Mr. Cohn ended up getting disbarred. There were other things Mr. Cohn did outside of what is shared in this post that I cannot share, or it could help to identify me to the folks involved. The investigators credited me with bringing the fraud to their attention. I lost my money in this ordeal, but gained an education, and I got to help bring down a crook. The sheer stupidity of Mark is that he didn't even follow the business plan that I had. He just used it as a story to convince investors to give him money. It is a business model that works very, very well. It took a few more years, but I'm now in a position to be pursuing this business full time, with people of high integrity who all work together to ensure each other's success. We expect to have an extremely profitable year in 2023 after proving the business model worked in 2022. This comment just takes the cake here. Why don't you call law enforcement and see what happens? You don't say that when you're so full of crap. Lawyer makes post-car accident worse for his client. Posted by Desert Dweller. I used to work in the claims department for one of the top auto insurance companies in America. I get a phone call from a lawyer looking to file a new accident claim for his client. His client is also my customer. I explained that I can take the initial report from the lawyer, but will be contacting the client to get his side of the story. The lawyer immediately tells me that I am not to contact the client because he is being represented by a lawyer. I explain that until I have an official letter of representation on file, I have every right to contact the client. So anyway, I proceed to gather all the details from the lawyer. Once I finish filing the claim, I generate a claim number and give it to the lawyer. The lawyer was stalling me a little bit, and I soon realized why. He was using the time to get an official letter of representation on file so I couldn't contact his client, also my customer, which he did, and now I'm not able to speak with the client unless given permission by the lawyer. The lawyer was a total pompous butt and was definitely trying to throw his weight around just to show that he was important. He definitely thought that he was putting me in my place. He proceeds to tell me that the client has minor injuries such as back and neck pain and is going to see a doctor. I explained that the client may see whatever doctor he wishes, but that it's best to have us get in contact with his doctor of choice as soon as possible so we can start using the coverage to pay for any medical bills. The lawyer gets all huffy-puffy with me and tells me that the client will go see a doctor and get all the medical help that he needs, and once it's all done and over with, he will send us a bill that we will be required to pay in full. I explain that it doesn't work that way. Some doctors require certain payments from insurance companies up front, or at least be in contact with the insurance company to confirm that certain payments will be paid. I also explained that the client only had a certain amount of coverage that he pays for. We are not required as an insurance company to pay more than what the client has on his policy. So, for example, if the client has $10,000 in coverage, we would only pay half of a $20,000 medical bill. I also explained that if the doctor hasn't been in contact with an insurance company, they may charge the client, and the client will have to go through a different, longer process for us to reimburse him than if we just paid the doctor up front. Now, I know that all this sounds like a bunch of corporate BS, and it is, but I don't make the rules. I'm really trying my hardest to make this as easy as possible for the client, but the lawyer just isn't having it at all. The lawyer demands that the client will go to whatever doctor he wants and will receive whatever treatment he wants, and that we will pay for it in full, and the client will pay nothing out of pocket regardless of the cost of treatment. I went back and forth with the lawyer, but eventually you gotta understand that you're just going in circles and it's time to just take the loss. So I do, and we move on to the vehicle. Lawyer says it's damaged, but the client drove the car from the accident scene straight to the lawyer's office. The windshield was damaged and there were fluids leaking from the car. I recommended that we tow the vehicle to a repair shop, and I explained the customer had towing coverage and we can get a tow truck free of charge. The lawyer refuses and says the client can drive the car. The lawyer also demands that the client uses a repair shop of his choice. I explained to the lawyer that the client is absolutely allowed to use a shop of his choice, but that we have to send an adjuster out to the car to inspect the damage and give a quote to the repair shop. The reason we did this is a lot of times body shops will take advantage of insurance companies because they know we will pay, and the shops fix things that don't need to be fixed and purposely buy more expensive parts to hike up the price. It's pretty much insurance fraud. So we usually send an expert of our own out to assess the damage and write up a fair and legit repair estimate. The lawyer refuses and says that he isn't telling us the shop that the car is going to, and once again, we will get a bill once all the work is done, and we will be required to pay the full bill regardless of the price. I explained that we do not cover the cost of aftermarket parts, only factory parts. It's listed in our contract. The customer agreed to this when he signed up, and once again, corporate BS, I know, but I don't make the rules, and I'm really trying to help the customer out here so he doesn't have a bunch of unnecessary crap to deal with. I argued with this lawyer for a long time about how things work and why the way that he was trying to handle this was going to end up costing the client money. The lawyer was on a path of destruction and was making every possible scenario worse for the client. The lawyer wasn't having any of it, and of course threatened to sue and all that crap. I finally gave in and let the lawyer do whatever he wanted. I knew the worst case scenario would come of this, and I figured I'd let the lawyer and the client feel the consequences of their stupid decisions and the lawyer trying to assert his dominance. I let him and his client do what they thought was best. I mean, why listen to the professional, right? What ends up happening is the customer takes the car to some sketchy shop. They do exactly what we feared and jack the price way up. They put expensive aftermarket replacement parts on the car, which we don't cover. The customer had to pay out of pocket for a bunch of stuff to the repair shop, and the repair shop took longer than the 30 days to repair his car, because the longer they have the car, the more they can charge. We only cover 30 days for a rental car, so the client ends up paying out of pocket for a rental car too. Also, the client had to pay some out-of-pocket expenses to his doctor. We ended up reimbursing him for the doctor bills, but it was a long, drawn-out process, and very frustrating. We did not refund him for some of the expenses at the body shop, which amount to more than $1,000. In the end, the customer had a ton more out-of-pocket expenses and headaches because of his butthole lawyer. I'd be pressing this issue finding out what happened, because you just don't let a lawyer take advantage of you like that. That's messed up, man. He's supposed to be in your corner, not his, trying to make himself look great. And in the end, it backfired on him. HOA breaks the law. I take them to court and lawyer up with final updates. Click the video on your screen so you get the whole story and conclusion, and I'll see you there.